Welcome to the Crack the MBA show. My name is Nupur Gupta and I'm your host. Our guest today is Shiv Ganesh, who graduated from the Booth School at University of Chicago in 2020 as a J.N. Tata Scholar and as a Booth Merit Scholar. At Booth, Shiv was involved with the tech, analytics, management consulting, and South Asian business groups. Prior to Booth, Shiv worked in data science at Oyo. Shiv currently works as a senior data scientist at a sports startup called Mojo in Chicago. Hi, Shiv. Thank you so much for joining us on the show.
Hi, Nipul. Thank you so much for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Wonderful. Shiv, can you tell our audience a little bit about where you grew up, your college education, and your work experiences prior to Booth?
I grew up in Madurai, Tamil Nadu. I did my entire schooling over there, and then I did my undergrad education in engineering from College of Engineering, Hindi, in electronics and communication engineering. And then I went on to pursue a master's degree from the Indian Institute of Science, where I focused on system science and machine learning. One of the reasons why I decided to pursue this master's program was to kind of explore my interest in applied mathematics and how it has the potential to be part of like so much problem solving in businesses. That naturally led me to pursue a path in data science with an intersection of applied data science in business problem solving. Naturally, I started my professional career as a data scientist at Oyo Rooms. I was one of the earliest data scientists to join there. So naturally, I had a lot of exposure in seeing firsthand how I can build data science tools and products to solve some of their really core challenging problems, whether when it came to operations, revenue management, or even marketing. So it was a great journey for me and a great learning experience as well.
Shiv, prospective students would love to hear a little bit about your admissions journey as well. So, could you share why you were looking to pursue an MBA?
Like I said, when I started at OU Rooms, I really wanted to explore this career where I'm able to bring together my knowledge or theoretical learning, machine learning and engineering to solve practical business problems. And I was really able to add value in the business. But I also realized that my learnings, my experience on the engineering and theoretical side were really just one half of the problem, or one half of like the solution, rather, sorry. The other half is about understanding how business works and also kind of connecting this mathematical and theoretical background with practical problem solving. And from that perspective, for me, an MBA made total sense because it gave me a good understanding of, or rather at that point of time, my rationalization was it would give me a good understanding of how business works and how to connect with the problems of business. And also it would give me a great amount of soft skills and the ability to connect with people and present my solutions and advocate for my solutions. So it was a combination of both networking and skills as well as kind of understanding nuts and bolts of business.
Shiv, can you talk about the admissions process that you went through? What were the top 2 or 3 factors that helped you succeed in your application to Booth?
The admissions journey is a long and lengthy battle, I would say. There were so many high points as well as like kind of obstacles. On the positive side, I had a good GMAT score, but GMAT is just one part of the overall application. So obviously, over indexing on GMAT is more like I had a good GMAT score that it won't be a problem. Let's put it that way. But there were other components to my application where on the positive side, I had a master's education related to data science, and then I was working in a business or a startup where I was able to apply those learning. So there was no abrupt transitions or anything. So I was able to like build together a coherent story to the admissions team, saying that I started here and I wanted to do this. I went through an education that helped me achieve that, and then I came to a profession where I'm able to employ that education. I was also able to connect my long and short term goals as to how they are logical next steps in my professional journey. These were kind of what worked in favor, I would say. But there were things that really was stacked against me. That were really stacked against me from the perspective that I had gone on a medical sabbatical for like 8 months due to some illness. So obviously there was a big gap in my professional journey before Oyo. So It was like I finished my master's education. I worked for 10 months in a company, and then there was a 9-month break, and then I started at Mojo. So obviously, on the face of it, it might not look good. So I had to justify why I took that break and things like that. And one more thing was I didn't have as much sophisticated what people usually associate with kind of an MBA candidate, like being involved with so many NGOs or being involved in some kind of extracurricular activities of sport. I didn't have anything that stood out other than my core personality of being in data science. So to kind of overcome that as well as the gap was kind of a little bit of challenge for me, but it worked out in the end. And I'm happy to talk about what I did in either of these elements as well.
Right. If you could briefly talk about how you overcame these obstacles, I think that could be really helpful.
Definitely. So in the case of my professional gap, the admissions committee, they're just humans like us. So I just wrote an additional essay saying that why I had to take this break, and there was a proper reason in my case. The only thing that I added was how this break transformed me. I kind of worked hard even during this break to make sure that when I become fully ready to work again, I don't have any kind of deficiency in my technical skills. I was able to work even while I was recovering. I was able to, go for online classes even when I was recovering. So like just a little bit of mentions of these things really kind of made sure that the admissions committee understood that this was inevitable for me and hence, but I still made sure that it wasn't too bad on my overall professional life. So at the end of the day, they are very empathetic themselves. So they will understand if you have any kind of situations in your life. Of course, not everyone has a medical break, but there might be other reasons why you had to take a break or anything else. So obviously, if you're being honest about it, I think that goes a long way in terms of convincing them that yes, they would be able to see from your shoes as well. The other one, that's I think is a very common problem which candidates face, especially in a country like India where education is placed at most importance and we don't typically are encouraged to explore other avenues as well, which potentially people from the West usually do. You don't have to be really, really anxious about, oh my God, I have to build an experience association with some NGOs. I have to do this volunteering work. It's not necessary unless you actually are passionate about it. So admissions committee usually value depth over breadth. So I would say pick out two core facets of your personality and just talk in extensive detail about it. So in my case, one part of my personality was about how I'm very interested in applied math, and like I essentially created crafted my entire career around that space. So not just saying that I'm a data scientist because I love data or science or something like that, but more like give the motivation or how it influenced you like from a beginning, from early child onwards, how so forming out that coherent story and actually strengthening your journey will really help. And the other aspect of my personality was how I was interested in politics. This is something I'm really passionate about, and talking about how it would potentially connect with my MBA journey. So just being honest and truthful to yourself and like writing in depth about these interests rather than having like a wide variety of NGO or voluntary work would go a long way in convincing people.
Coming to school selection, right? What led you to choose Booth for your MBA? I believe you had other opportunities as well.
I wanted to go into a school where they actually place a premium on approaching business problems with an analytical rigor. And that made my job easy because that brought down the number of schools to a very small handful of schools that actually do that. When I say that, approach something from an analytical rigor, I mean like not just like, building mathematical models or something, but more like ingrained into the culture of the school. A business school is not just the business school in itself. There is the larger, associated other schools like economics and finance. So obviously, there are only certain set of schools which have this long-standing heritage or culture of encouraging research and participation in, or rather approaching business problems from this analytical kind of focus. And that narrowed my search to very few schools. And without mentioning other schools, Booth was probably like my number one choice when it came to this. I think the first thing that comes to anyone's mind when you talk about Booth is just that they're focused on analytical approach, the Chicago school of thought. So everything is kind of adds up together. And so that made my job really easy. And thankfully, I was able to make it to the school, which I really wanted to be there.
What does the Chicago approach mean for you? And if at all you have an anecdote or an example to help us better understand it even better.
Loosely speaking, what it means is that instead of approaching problems on a case to case basis, the faculty or the entire research atmosphere at Chicago teaches you a broad framework of tools that you can apply to solve any problems in the future. That is not to say that you will be invincible and everything will be falling in places for you directly, rather, giving you a more generalizable set of frameworks and tools to approach business problems in the future is what I think it would aptly define, or rather, very closely define the Chicago approach. To give you a few examples, like when I took my marketing strategy class, instead of working out through different cases of marketing approaches, what the professor taught me was more like approach it from these specific angles and like from a customer perspective, and basically gave me a very easily digestible set of frameworks or tools for evaluating marketing and growth strategies for any business. And that is actually so versatile that I can even now, even whether it's Mojo or any company which I'm currently working for, I am still able to borrow those tools and techniques to kind of at least have a broad understanding of where we are heading and things like that. So I think that versatility is what I would really, really appreciate in terms of the Chicago approach.
Can you talk about what kind of outreach you undertook to get to know Booth?
I think there are like two broad outreach opportunities that you would have as a potential candidate. One is basically getting involved in school sponsored events. So in my case, when I was in Gurgaon, there was an event that happened in Delhi. So I went there. It was a great opportunity because the admissions committee brought together a broad set of alums from Booth who happened to work in diverse fields, and they were also happened to be in India. So it was a great opportunity for me to actually listen to them about their own experiences at Booth and how in their career, how they were able to take advantage of the Booth's network. In addition to that, it's just about looking up people on LinkedIn and just cold emailing them saying that, hey, would you like to, schedule a chat and things like that. Very often people are very supportive and they usually respond back. And it's even better when you kind of mix your networking with both like alums who have made who are already in the professional back in the industry, whereas with the first year and second year students, because their perspectives are so different, so you would get a more well-rounded understanding of the life and experience there.
Okay, that's really helpful. Thanks, Shiv. Shiv, just reflecting on the admissions process, right? What do you think you could have done better? And do you have any advice for prospective applicants?
I would definitely say that. I would definitely say that there was probably two things that I would really want or at least advise potential candidates to keep in mind. One is when you're talking about essays and when you're writing down your essays, it's always good to keep some stories or some anecdotes in reserve. So I'll tell you why I mean this. What I mean through this. So when I was applying for Booth, a typical candidate usually has a set of stories that they usually kind of bring it together and write it in their essays, anecdotes, and stories. Now, what happened in my case was I kind of used all my stories for my first admissions essay for Booth, and it was so impressive. But then when the AdCom came back saying that, hey, we like your profile, we want to interview you. But as part of the interview process, we also want you to write a secondary essay. And that was when I didn't have new stories actually. And I really kind of hit a writer's block of sorts. And then I had to really think about things. And finally, I was able to put together a good job. But then this is very important. This seems a little trivial or mundane, but actually it's very important that you always have a reserved set of anecdotes for you. You never know when your B school will surprise you and ask for more stories or anecdotes. So I would say that's something I would keep in mind. And more importantly, I would say I indexed too much on the admissions essays, and that was very helpful in keeping my application stand out. But at the same time, I think I could have done more about interview process as well. Because I remember coming out of the interview process thinking that I don't think I'm getting this. I came so close, but I don't think I made it because there were certain questions which kind of completely caught me off guard. And I think being very prepared for the interview goes a long way in terms of uh, showing that confidence to the interviewer as well that you are so well prepared. As much as it's difficult to sit down and write on your essays and things like that, interview carry a humongous weight as well. And it's not a very minor detail that you can overlook. So I would definitely be focused on that as well if I do it all over again.
Very helpful and definitely tips we don't usually hear. So, very uncommon and helpful advice, Shiv. Thank you. Shiv, what's something you wish you did or that you knew prior to getting to business school?
When I approached business school, I was thinking about, even though I said that, I wanted to build on my networking skills and like professional skills as well, like more as an evolve as an all-rounded, well-rounded leader, business leader through the business school. I thought it would be very close to kind of a master's education, and I indexed too much on. I wouldn't say too much, but I was thinking of approaching it more like you take courses and then you learn through it. But what really happens in a B school is much different from that. It's not going to be anyone who has done a master's degree. It's not going to be like your typical master's MS or other degrees. It is going to be from day one, you'll act like you have gotten your MBA. So you're going to start on like, things that you probably would not have done before, like, take leadership responsibilities for student clubs or even like start recruiting from like week 3, week 4 onwards. So you will be learning on the fly rather. Like it's really helpful if you come with that mindset prior beforehand. So where you can probably think about the industry or the companies that you are interested in applying to, and look at some of the profiles of people who work there already, maybe even start reaching out to them before you start your B school. These kind of give you a head start, because when I started at B school, I was under the impression that first quarter would be more on like academics, and then you slowly start recruiting. But it wasn't the case at all. It was essentially from week 3, week 4 onwards, you were asked, start recruiting, start networking. So I think if you prepare a little bit beforehand, it takes a lot of anxiety and stress off you.
Booth is different from other top MBA programs in that there is no first year core curriculum. And apart from LEAD, there is no required course. So, how does that shape the MBA journey? What are the pros and cons of this teaching pedagogy?
Yeah, that's a great question. In fact, it was one of the reasons why I wanted to be part of both. Like it kind of was a good supplementary kind of dimension to the to the analytical approach of both. I will talk about both the pros and the cons as you had mentioned. Like on the positive side, you can really skip classes or courses that won't be fully aligned with your professional interest. So honestly, like jump deep into the ones that you are really passionate about. So I came from a background in data science, and I, even in my long and short term goals, are rather actually post MBA, I wanted to get it back into data science. So what my requirements were not to kind of waste time on too many courses that steered away from this specific career alignment in my case. And I was able to really take far advanced classes in data science and analytics at both from day one. So, like first quarter, I was taking a really advanced data science course, and it made sense in my case because I had my data science background covered. This was more on how the business and data science play interrelationship work out to be. So it made total sense to me. But obviously, it wouldn't make sense to someone else who's coming from a very good finance background. But for them, basic accounting won't make sense. So this kind of freedom is nowhere else available. So, and these courses really helped me in my internship searches as well. Like I was able to actually apply what I learned in these classes in my internship interviews, which happened in the second quarter. So that I don't think any other school, being biased here, but any other school, I don't think they can claim this kind of flexibility in. The downside is obviously it could become a little stressful where you are taking ownership of your professional journey. And yes, you will have advisors to advise you on professional courses, on the courses that you classwork you can take, given your goals. But at the end of the day, you have a full ownership of it, and sometimes you might neglect or not take classes that you thought you might not be interested or might not be relevant to you. In my case, I put off taking accounting, finance, these focus courses till like my second year, second half. And when I finally did those courses, I was like, oh my God, these are very interesting. Probably I should have taken a little earlier and could have taken a little more advanced classes in these, areas. So yeah, I think that is one of the downsides I would say, but I think you can mitigate that by just keep talking to students and like seniors and thinking about which classes are good and relevant to your area, and also making sure you're keeping an open mind and not saying so focused on your own kind of interest. The other downside is, of course, you won't have kind of a consistent set of classmates to do homeworks and kind of have a bonding opportunities there. In my case, I the my homework buddies or homework partners were the ones whom I networked a lot, and it really helped me. But sometimes when the quarter ends, we lose that connection, and it's hard to kind of keep up that momentum. Whereas if you have like a fixed set of classes, you're pretty likely to stay with the same set of students whom you work with for like at least 2 3 quarters.
How do people navigate that? How do people manage to develop close connections initially, especially in the first year?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I saw was that you had mentioned about the leadership program, the lead program, basically. So that helps a little bit if you're on a single cohort, like if you're on the same cohort. Kind of, we created some WhatsApp group where we said like we will have dinner at each of their places, like once in a month or once in 2 weeks or 3 weeks. So that kind of kept the momentum going a little bit. But there was also this another thing where we have something called random walk before the business school starts, which is essentially like student organized trips going over to different countries. I saw that the bonding between these random walk cohorts was actually strong even after B school started, and also it went almost to the end of B school because it is like a way to connect with students outside this B school professional journey, and like they're more genuine and they're stronger in a way. So that's something, if anyone who gets into both, I would definitely recommend going on a random walk. In addition to that, I think professional clubs are a great way to stay in touch. Anyone who's part of your same professional club, whether it's marketing or like consulting, technology, they typically tend to form good relationship and that stays over time.
Shiv, you talked about the random walk. So, for people who are uninitiated about what that is, could you just briefly describe it? And if you went on it, could you talk about your experience as well?
Yeah, unfortunately, I did the mistake of not going for the random walk. First of all, random walks are essentially student organized trips to really, really good and exotic location before B school starts. They basically kind of do kind of an auction methodology. I don't exactly remember how these trips are kind of selected, but you basically like the trips are already like the itineraries and all prepared, and there is like a fixed budget associated with each of them. You will have different levels of difficulty level, if you will. Like some will be very easy, like no kind of camping of sorts. Some will be extremely outdoorsy, where you have to like you won't even have access to proper restrooms. The trips kind of range from very easy to very difficult kind of ones, and there is obviously a budget associated with each of them. So you essentially have to kind of bid for each of those tips, like kind of give you the first, second, third options and things like that. And they do some kind of a rank choice, some kind of a assignment mechanism, and then finally you get assigned to a particular destination or trip. Yeah, you get to go with and meet future classmates. I think they are usually like a week or like 10-day long trip. So a very, very great opportunity to bond with classmates without the pressures and the stresses associated with your B school life because the life hasn't started yet. So really, really, and in a non-professional setting as well. So I highly recommend that. they cost anywhere between $3,000 to $4,000, and that was one of the reasons why I thought, okay, maybe it's not important, but I think it's very important.
Can you talk a little bit about housing and how people manage to stay together and socialize despite living in different locations?
Yeah, that's a great question. Booth has a very unique city school atmosphere, but also has somehow it has evolved into a really, really close knit network. I'll tell you why. First of all, yes, I think close to 80% of the students, close to 75 to 80% of students live downtown, whereas the remaining 20-25% people live in Hyde Park, which is in the university campus. Hyde Park has its own kind of reputation of some, not being that safe and things like that. But the students who live there didn't have much issues. But they're generally likely to be married couples, usually. Anyone who's not married, or more like 80% of people live downtown, even though it's a little far. The reason why most of them choose to live downtown is not because just like it's not that great safety or issues of that of Hyde Park, but more like you will have more networking opportunities in downtown rather in Hyde Park, especially for people working in trying to be part of consulting or banking. The consultants and bankers schedule regular coffee chats, maybe in a Starbucks or something like that. Or even they ask you to come down to the office. Students have a great way to kind of attending these coffee chats amidst all the busy schedules if they live downtown and not in Hyde Park. So that's one of the major reasons why most of them choose to live in downtown. In terms of how people tend to like connect with each other and form that close kind of community despite living in downtown, that is basically like, I don't know if it happened by chance or by design. All the students live in like majorly between 3 or 4 buildings in downtown, and they are just stones throw away from each other. And even among those like 3-4 buildings, there is a specific building called Millennium Park Plaza, where I think close to 50% of the community lives there. So at some point, you almost feel like it's a dorm and not like some kind of an apartment building that you rented out. Because at the end of the day, people just post, 1106, 1205. So they just post their number, like unit numbers, and we just like keep shuffling between them on like Slack groups and all those things. It's such a close knit community because of that. And even when we are working on homework assignments and all those things, they just mention like the business rooms in like either Millennium Park Plaza or the other 3 buildings. So you just like walk around and go to the whole business offices and like start working on your homework assignments. So yeah, it's a great setting that you get the advantages of living in a downtown without having to be scattered or spread around like probably you will expect in New York or other cities.
Yeah, I know that building. I happened to be in Chicago when I was in the MBA process myself. And the building, I was living in the Millennium Park building you talked about. There were a lot of
Nice.
booths there. So I remember even meeting somebody there.
If you come down to the lobby, you will find a boothie or like, a couple of booths there all the time. So there is, yeah.
Yeah, super, super cool.
And one more detail I forgot to mention is, sorry, Nupur, is that there are like good Metra, which is almost like a metro of sorts in Chicago, which is just a hop away from these 4 buildings. So you just get onto the train and then you get out at the university campus. So the commuting is also very easy.
Okay, that's really helpful. And Shiv, one thing which you were talking about, and also something we've been hearing a little bit about, is the safety aspect, right? You talked about Hyde Park. So there's been some news about certain incidents which have happened. So just wanted to get your perspective on how safe, in your opinion, is it at University of Chicago and at Booth specifically?
Yeah, it's really an unfortunate situation. I would say that like some of the developments that happened in the last year, it was really honestly it was shocking as well as very unfortunate. The loss of a couple of precious lives there, really promising students. I think these incidents were really, really like very isolated and very not commonplace occurrences. But that being said, Hyde Park is having a not great reputation, and we are usually encouraged to take classes that are in the morning rather than like evening classes. So yeah, that is just part and parcel of the school's atmosphere. But like generally speaking, the location where the school is located or your walk to the railway station, the metro station, These are all usually protected by campus police, so there is not much activity unless you try to like veer really far away from the campus. That's where probably there are some unsafe corners, I would say. But other than that, it's usually kind of crowded with students all the time. So yeah, that's kind of my 2 cents on that.
Talking a little bit more in depth about academics, right? Shiv, you talked about all these great classes that you got an opportunity to take. Can you tell us about your favorite classes and professors?
I would say, hands down, there are like a couple of classes that I really, really would like to go back and take all over again. One is Advanced Microeconomic Analysis by Dr. Kevin Murphy. He's called Turbo Murphy, fondly called Turbo Murphy in Booth because his class is really on turbo mode. He doesn't use PowerPoint presentations. He uses whiteboard. He's just amazing. He's an amazing economist, very, very well renowned. And it's honestly an honor to be in his class. I mean, having never come from an economics background, being in his class was just amazing for me. Obviously, it kind of aligns with the analytical rigor and the kind of the Chicago approach I talked about. He teaches you a broad set of economic tools that helps you analyze and kind of you take with you, carry on with you for the rest of your life. It stays with you forever. And the other, probably 2 more classes I would say is one was revenue management by Professor Caldente. He's also an extremely, extremely sweet professor. It's basically a course about how you do revenue management across several industries. For example, in the airline or the hospitality industry, you typically increase prices as you approach the D-Day. Whereas in fashion, it's the other way around. It's like markdown pricing as the time increases. So there is a reason and there is math guiding all these decisions. And his class essentially covers every single industry like this and the associated mathematical models as well as the frameworks that are relevant there. So again, a wonderful class. And third, I would say there was a class called Data Science for Marketing Decision Making by Professor Gunther Hisch. I'm not sure if I pronounced his name right, but he was amazing. It is again, as the name implies, using data science for approaching marketing management rather. How do you manage churn? How do you set prices? How would you target customers through CRM? Everything is guided by data and analytics. And his class, you actually engage in actual real world data, which is exclusively available for his class. Yeah, it was a great honor to be in that class as well. All of them very relevant to my areas of interest. So I really enjoyed being in each of these classes.
Shiv, I know you talked about the random walk as a must-do experience. Apart from that, is there anything else that you would recommend as a must-do experience at Booth?
I would say it's very competitive, but if there is an opportunity to be part of the lead program, volunteer, not the participant, it would be great. So what happens is that the lead program is called the leadership development program, which is very unique to Chicago Booth, is that they have like a kind of a boot camp of sorts, like during the first quarter, where you engage in a series of leadership development exercises. And these are typically designed and led by second year volunteers who kind of take ownership of the class design and things like that for an entire cohort. And to be part of the student volunteer is extremely competitive. There's a lot of interviews and things like that. Again, there's networking happening there. But if you actually manage to be part of it, that is a great experience as well. Typically, that happens later on in your first year, towards the end of your spring quarter when these interviews are happening. So it's very important to network with existing student volunteers because they are the ones who's going to select the ones for the next year. So that is definitely one I would strongly recommend. And I would also recommend, if possible, any kind of leadership positions in any other student-led clubs. Whether it's professional or interest clubs, it doesn't matter. It is very important, or it's very highly recommended to do that because it gives you kind of lifelong connections as well.
Shiv, you were involved with 4 clubs, right? Like tech, analytics, management consulting, and the South Asian business groups. Can you tell us a little bit about the major activities and purposes of each of these groups?
Yeah, definitely. I'll go one by one. The professional clubs are the Booth Technology Group and the Booth Management Consulting Group, MCG rather. And there was also the Analytics Group, which is still up and coming. So I was involved in it. But the big ones are these two, the other two, which is Booth Technology and the MCG, which is the consulting group. I would say if you have interest or want to create a career in either consulting or technology, both these groups are a kind of a must to be part of. I don't think, at least with consulting, I don't think you would ever land a job in consulting without the MCG. They essentially streamline and make this entire stressful process a little more predictable, I would say, because they are there to guide you in your networking opportunities with consultants. And all these consulting companies work closely with the MCG chairs to MCG, basically the student presidents, basically to kind of design their coffee chat and all the networking sessions with them. So by being part of the club, you will have exclusive opportunity to be part of all these coffee chats and other networking opportunities with these consultants. And then once a networking, kind of session goes in, full turbo mode, then they slowly start introducing case preparations as well. So this is later in the half of the fall quarter, which is the first quarter, where you will start, giving or practicing cases with second years as well as like fellow first years, and then they help you in the interview preparations as well when you finally land an interview. So MCG is amazing. When I went through the club's activities, I found it very stressful. But now thinking back, I think they were making an extremely stressful and unpredictable experience a little less stressful and a little more predictable. So it's a strong recommendation. Both technology group is not as structured as the consulting, mainly because technology companies themselves are not structured in their recruiting processes. But they do give you a lot of resources to prepare, especially if you're into product management, product marketing management, as well as any kind of niche fields in the tech industry. And also, it gives you access to kind of students who already cracked it in the previous years, and they can share their experience as well. There is even a chance that they will be able to provide you referrals as well. And in technology industry, referral makes a big deal in whether you get an interview or not. In both these cases, these clubs are very helpful in your professional search. Coming to the South Asian Business Group, which is basically kind of kind of a group bringing together South Asian. There is no specific India group, but rather like South Asian, India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka. They all come together to form this South Asian Business Group. I would say, as a South Asian myself, South Asian Business Group was one of the important kind of clubs that kind of makes you feel a little less homesick and kind of make you feel that there is an entire community here that you can rely on, having traveled so many miles away from your hometown, so and your friends and family there. So really, really amazing group, amazing vibe. There is such a plethora, diverse interest in the group. So whether you want to be in consulting, whether you want to be in technology, or even random for like people like me who wanted to be in analytics and data science, there'll always be someone there who had already done that, and you can go and reach out to them. They will do your resume reviews. It's essentially kind of a pay it forward kind of club, and played a vital role in, first of all, making me less homesick. So yeah, definitely a great resource. Finally, I'm sorry, I forgot to mention of the Booth Analytics Group. The Booth Analytics Group is more like an up and evolving group. There is no, at least when I was during my time at Booth, it wasn't as structured as the other groups. But it's been 2 years now. The groups saw a tremendous improvement between the time I joined and between the time I graduated. So now it's probably even more structured. But at its basic or like core, it's basically helping students who come from diverse backgrounds to have kind of at least a minimum set of skills and exposure to kind of form a career in analytics. And this could be something like giving you basic Excel training or training in tools like R and Python. They have a lot of bootcamp sessions. So it is more ad hoc than the other group, but nonetheless, they're very valuable, especially for someone who's who's coming from a completely different field and wanted to try their hands in analytics. So it's a great resource opportunity as well from that perspective.
Shiv, now transitioning a little bit to recruiting, right? Can you speak to us about the recruiting timeline at Booth? When do the different industry employers arrive on campus?
Yeah, great question. Honestly, it would have been very helpful for me if I had known these timelines in advance of joining both. For consulting, it starts almost, I think it starts a week four, I think, the week four of your business school journey. So that's when, one of the biggest, like, I can say, comes to the campus and makes sure, like, has a massive corporate conversation kind of event, and then you take it forward from there. From there, it's an endless stream of coffee chats and networking sessions throughout the rest of your first quarter, and then you start doing case preparations during the end of first quarter, and then during the winter break, you should ideally have prepared for like 40 or 50 cases with your friends and seniors, and then January second week onwards, the interview starts. So that's like a typical consulting timeline. So if you're really interested in consulting, I would say make sure that you're familiar with the broader industry, the broader casing terms and things like that, like reading about the books on cracking the casing interviews and things like that really helps. Though casing is only one part of it, the networking is important as well. So if you come and start at both, they will say that networking is so important, and they will not allow you to start case preparation in the first probably 5 weeks or so. That's how the consulting timeline works. Second is technology. Technology industry is typically a little less structured. I would say very unstructured rather. It depends. The big tech is a little more structured. The startups and the smaller firms are not structured at all. Startups and the smaller firms do more like just in time recruiting, which means they come just at the end of spring quarter and like post positions. It's more networking heavy, and also like you have to reach out to people on LinkedIn, and you won't have confirmation till like the very end of first year. So it's as an international student, it's very risky. So people usually go for big tech and then pivot to startups later on in their professional lives. So big tech, I would say Amazon is more structured. They come around like November or December. Apple is more structured. They come early on. They have networking sessions, but they all have their interviews in like during the winter quarter of like January, February, and things like that. The only difference between big tech and like these startups is that they have more clear understanding of their requirements. So you would know in advance who's recruiting and who's not. And they will also be more willing to come to campus during like November, December, when you can go and talk to people. But there is a lot of industries or companies which lie between this big tech of Google and Amazon and Apple and obscure startups. Like this is kind of mid-scale tech companies. They don't come to campus, but they typically post their roles around like January or December on like LinkedIn and on things like that. So for them, it's advisable you talk to someone before applying, but it's not mandatory. The goal is to apply to as many companies as possible, not to kind of here it's more breadth before depth. I would, at least based on my own experience, you typically apply to as many tech companies as possible, and then keep your fingers crossed that you hear back from some of them. It would be great if you could connect to someone and ask them to put down a referral, but if you can't, that should not stop you from applying because the scale matters. For banking almost similarly mirrors the experience of consultants. They are even more, their process is even more structured than consulting and more hectic as well. But the conversion probability is higher in banking than consulting. So it's kind of a trade-off. The more miserable you are in the first quarter, the higher you are likely to get a job in January. And my roommate was in banking, and he was miserable throughout the fall quarter, but he was the first one to get a job, and he was so happy for winter and spring quarter. So it's kind of a trade-off, I would say. For other kind of recruiting, in my case, I recruited more on analytics roles. So my summer internship was with BCG's data science team, BCG Gamma, and their recruiting timeline is so different from BCG consulting. With them, I did a little bit of networking, but it is a very straightforward process where you go and apply on their website, and if they like you, they call you back and ask you to go through a tech kind of screening round, and then you have multiple interviews. That is why I said there is a huge ground between the big tech and like consulting and small industries. Like you keep applying to them and they come back to you. So it's very important to have your LinkedIn set on premium mode and keep job alerts and things like that.
You talked about your internship search experience at BCG Gamma, right? Can you talk a little bit about what the internship itself entailed? What does a day look like? What skills are required? And how did your past experiences help you in this role? Can somebody without prior data science experience succeed in that job?
Yes, I would say it is probably easier to crack the interviews if you don't come from a data science background, as long as you're willing to put in the effort to crack their like interviews, because their interviews are usually case interviews, but more aligned on like data science and things like that. You can easily get the training, especially from the booth analytics group and things like that, to crack those cases, because it's more a theoretical understanding of how you would approach a problem. But in terms of day-to-day experience for me at BCG Gamma, so it was almost similar to kind of a senior data scientist role that you would work for in any company, where you're essentially building machine learning products for your client, for BCG's client, basically. And you very often they have their own technology team, technology stacks. So you would have to work closely with them to understand what their technology stacks are, and then work on tools and software scripts that aligns with their technology stack. So, but there is massive amount of support within the BCG community. They have their own internal software engineers and things like that who can make sure that you don't have to like worry too much about the engineering side. You can just code data science products, but they will help you on the engineering system side. But that being said, it is still going to be coding heavy. So if you are someone who's not into too much Python or R program, I mean, it's usually going to be Python. So if you're not someone who's very comfortable with Python, then I wouldn't advise someone to pursue that, because at the end of the day, that's going to be a daily, job. But that being said, BCG Gamma is, you get to experience working or building data science products for a wide variety of clients that could range from really, really established businesses, which have with a very enduring or like with a very well established tech and engineering stacks. And it also involve extremely small companies which don't have anything on the engineering system. It's a personal choice, which is better. Sometimes working in a smaller company with no established engineering stacks actually helps you as a consultant, because you then kind of work from scratch and you can do everything yourself. But sometimes having a bigger engineering stack means that you will build products that will be more sustainable and not be replaced immediately after you leave. So either ways, you will still be building products. So that's something to keep in mind. If you don't enjoy doing that, at least for like 2 to 3 years down the line, I wouldn't recommend that.
Shiv, can you speak about your full time job search? What obstacles did you face and how did you overcome them?
In my case, for the viewers, I actually got an offer from Apple, but I got it through the campus recruitment process. It was relatively more structured. Full time is more structured than internship, especially in the tech side. And on the consulting, it's very difficult to get full time offer if you don't go through the internship pipeline. But on the tech in the tech industry, it's you have more structured interviews for full time. But it is also very long drawn out process. So I got my first round done in I think early September or early October, and I went through a series of interviews. I was flown to Cupertino in November, and then I had subsequent interviews in December as well, and then finally just a few days before my winter break, I got the offer. And I also got through two other offers through off campus, which is more like I applied on LinkedIn. I got into Capital One Analytics Group as well as Wayfair's data science team. In both these cases, again, the experience was quite similar. You apply and then you hear back from them. and it's very long drawn out between multiple rounds, and you won't hear back from them immediately. But other than that, I would say in terms of full time, I would say be prepared for questions on what you did during your internship, because when you are in recruiting full time, your most important question will be what you did during your internship and why you are not pursuing it, rather you're recruiting again. So you need to have a clear answer as to what is the motivation behind your search again. That's very important. In my case, I was able to tell them that having worked in a startup, having seen through the end-to-end execution of data science products, I was not extremely happy about just building an initial set of products and then going hands off in a consulting engagement. So that made complete sense with my own professional background and my own professional journey. So it was more relatable for the interviewers. But any other less convincing answers, or even my answer didn't convince certain people. So it's always a challenge that you should look out for when you're recruiting full time, especially if you are recruiting for a different company or industry from your internship experience.
Shiv, networking can be an important part of the internship and full time job search process, and even beyond that, right? So, based on your experiences, what are some best practices for networking that students can adopt?
I would say LinkedIn is going to be the resource for any B school candidate. Honestly, I'm genuinely lucky that I went to B school in an era where LinkedIn is this prevalent. I can't think of how my life would have been 6 or 7 years back when LinkedIn wasn't as big of a job finder as it is today, or not even a job finder. It is the professional network that stands out for professionals to engage and connect with each other. Don't be afraid to reach out to random strangers on LinkedIn. Send a connection request, and don't usually start by saying, I want a job in your firm. Especially in the West, Americans, especially at least like the human element in the job search process. So it should always be about connecting with them, saying, "Hey, I really liked reading about your profile. I really am passionate about this area. I would really love to hear from you about your experience, about what your challenges or your journey." Just frame it more from an engagement and conversation rather than from a job search. It is very stressful as a student. You're trying to find a job and you can't like do this kind of a dance, I would say, but it is very important. It's a very cultural element as well. So setting up your LinkedIn messages, rather emails, or connection requests to say that I'm fascinated or excited by what you have done in your life, and I would like to know your experience. You just that would kind of set a conversation rolling, and then you can slowly talk about your interests and how if they can help you pursue your goals. And other than that, you can always go to like the student alumni directory on the university's webpage and filter for, at least at Booth, we have this filter where you could like search for, if let's say I want to apply to Apple, I can just go there, type Apple, and it throws out people who are working at Apple and whatever email they have set as the kind of one that they prefer for people to contact them. And it could be both email address, it could some even put their Gmail or professional email address. So you just like send out cold emails to them. Typically, they have even higher response rates than LinkedIn because they are obviously your own school's networks. So you typically say like, both student, request for informational interview or something like that. And then you say that the same thing, I'm interested in your career and all those things, and then set up a conversation. So it's all about reaching, again, here also the breadth is more important than depth. Reach out to as many people as possible. 10% might respond, but those 10% are going to change your life. So that's how I would put it. And always take interest in what they say and what their stories have been, not just to get a job. That's the most important part I would emphasize.
Shiv, since you graduated, you've changed employers from Apple, right? You're currently working at Mojo. So, can you talk a little bit about what the company does and what do you do at the firm and what your day looks like?
At Apple, I was part of their operations and supply chain team, where I was actually part of their advanced analytics team, where I was building out data science products to help them plan out their day-to-day operations and supply chain management. So it was an exciting role, but now I'm currently at Mojo, which is like a sports analytics kind of startup, which is a Series A startup. And we were recently in stealth mode. Up until recently, we recently came out. So there are still certain elements about it that's still confidential because we haven't launched our app yet. But by and large, Mojo is going to be a stock market for sports athletes. So basically, it's about you're no longer going to bet on outcomes of a game, but rather you're going to, it's almost like a Robin Hood for athletes. Like you go long or short on athletes, you buy them at certain prices and sell them at certain prices. Their prices are going to be dictated by how they perform over their career. So if you know someone who early on that they're going to perform very well, then you can buy their stock on Mojo. And then if they keep doing well, then their price will go up and you can sell them later. So it's essentially, that's the concept. So it involves sports analytics in terms of predicting how the player's performance is going to be, not just in the next game, but in the next series of games over their lifetime. And it also involves a good amount of trading and finance bringing into it. So my role is essentially on the finance side. There are like teams working on the sports analytics side. I'm working on the finance side. I'm basically part of their risk management framework where I make sure that Mojo, the market maker, will not put too much skin in the game and there is not too much risk for Mojo and users can have a seamless experience trading on players. So that's kind of the overall details I have about my job, but unfortunately I couldn't share too much about it. But it's definitely a great experience because the Series A funded startup, just like 75 employees, and I was like a 50th, around the 50th employee. So great culture. And in terms of how my MBA education has played in, I would say, I was able to kind of, seamlessly migrate from, kind of an industry where of operations and other technology intensive industry to kind of a finance sports side startup. So it was a great learning experience for me, but also I strongly believe that like my education and food and things like that really prepared me to kind of accelerate that learning. Also being part of a company this small and this early, it is important to not be focused on just, building great data science products, but also products that actually make sense for the company at this scale. So I think that is where that understanding the business problem statements rather than just thinking about machine learning solutions is very important. And that definitely comes into play in every aspect or solutions that I'm designing, making sure that it's scalable as well as like relevant to the company at this time scale and not like futuristic AI driven kind of things. So yeah, that's my experience so far.
Speaking about being a data scientist more broadly, right? What advice do you have for someone interested in working as a data scientist? What education and experiences would you recommend they pursue? And is it possible to pursue a role in data science post MBA without any prior experience?
I would strongly say that analytics as a profession has evolved and grown over the years. And hence, I would strongly recommend that anyone who is interested in this line should not keep themselves up from trying for this just because they don't have the relevant background as of now. Especially when you go for an MBA, the companies that are looking for such, MBA students are typically keep an open mind about like their past backgrounds as long as they have the skill sets that at least they know that these students have the skill sets that would be required for the job. So focus on that basically is, do you have enough skills in Excel? Do you have enough skills in at least one kind of analytics tools, let's say R or Python? So these are things that you can essentially attend like a 3-month online course and you can actually become really sophisticated at it. You don't have to be go for a master's education just for that. Companies now are building out so much capabilities and strength in the analytics divisions within their organizations that they're actually not having enough people to recruit. So if you really want to grow as a data scientist, you don't have to necessarily start as a data scientist all the time, especially if you don't have the relevant background. You could make sure that you have the relevant analytical skills and the tools that I just talked about, and then even start as kind of a business analyst. Very often, like, some companies, they don't hire data scientists per se, but they usually hire business analysts from schools, and then these analysts, after 2 or 3 years, they actually become even like lead data scientists, managing a team of, analysts and data scientists. So especially that is where the MBA education helps, because the company always knows that you have something that like someone who having a typical data science background won't have, which is our understanding about business and the larger problem statements rather than focusing on just the engineering side. So it's always nice to keep an eye out for not just data science per se role, but any role that would potentially give you an outlet to data science in the next couple of years. So again, this is for people who don't have any connection to data science but would like to get into data science.
And Shiv, are there any certifications and technologies that are particularly valued in the field these days? I know you talked about R and Python already, but additionally.
Yes, definitely. I would say if you have the certifications on Coursera or Udacity on, maybe some kind of data analytics courses like nano degrees of sorts, like which incorporates all these tools as well as like other kind of mathematical backgrounds on statistics and things like that, would definitely be helpful. But I don't think they would make or break in terms of, so it's like this. I don't think companies, when they filter out your resumes, will be like, they have the certificate, so we have to call them up. But if you actually end up going for the interviews, knowledge of these would definitely put you at a very, very higher ground than anyone else who has not gone through them. So even if you think you don't have to get the certification per se, I would still say you can audit the course for free just so that you build the skill set. I don't have any Coursera certification, but I have taken so many Coursera classes for free just so that I understand what they have to offer. And they have helped me immensely in my interview processes.
So, Shiv, as we come to the close of the interview, just any parting thoughts and final advice that you may have on how incoming students can be better prepared to hit the ground running and succeed at business school?
Getting into a B school is going to be so, it is simultaneously both the best of times, as well as the most, kind of like the most stressful time of your life. When I got my admissions to Booth, I was like, I felt like, this is it. Like, oh, this is this. It was so exhausting and it was so stressful, but I finally made it. It's going to be amazing from now on. But boy, was I wrong, because day one at Booth, you're competing with fellow students who went through the same process and came out successful. So they are good at this. So they are ready for the next step. So obviously the next step is going to be even more stressful and even more kind of exhausting in a way. But I would say the fact that if you made it to a B school, it means that you have the potential to actually go through these steps. It is just a question of time. You will be in your own stream without that, and that is unique to yourself. So like in my case, analytics recruitment, it's so different from tech or consulting. So obviously I just have to have my heads down and keep applying and keep focusing on my interviews and preparation. So that's one thing I would emphasize to students, not to take it so not so serious as to like affecting your mental health. And number two, because everyone is going to get 99.99% of the time, everyone's going to get a job for sure. That's very important to keep in mind. And number two is that I would say resume is something that is probably overlooked, or in the sense that people don't pay as much attention to the resume points. It's not just you have the right names or the right designation, like product manager, data scientist in your resume. It should also reflect the right skills and the kind of requirements that the person is looking for from the candidate. So I would say keep shaping up your resume again and again and again. You would think at some point it is so perfect, but you need to keep working on it. I was so complacent when I went to B school, thinking that this resume got me my admission. So I'm probably going to get my offer as well from this resume. But my resume that I submitted for my internship interviews went through so many iterations that it was no longer recognizable. And then I thought my internship resume was the best. And then I went through again another series of resume changes for my full time. I realized how strong my resume was for full time compared to even my internship resume. And it was so different as well. So keep iterating it, keep iterating it. You would think it's a waste of time, but it's so important because hiring managers receive thousands of applications. Resume is going to be the one that differentiates, and it's not simple keywords that's going to separate you. It's going to be the core technical skills, not technical, not like Python or something, but more like professional skills that you highlight through your resume. So keep it as diverse and multi kind of skills kind of as much as possible.
So, Shiv, with that, we come to the end of our interview. And I really, really, really want to thank you for taking the time to be on the show and for sharing everything that you know so authentically and with such great willingness to help prospective and incoming students. Thank you so very much for your time.
Thank you so much, Nampar. It's honestly a great honor and great source of happiness to be here, actually.